If you're a long-term listener, you probably figured out by now I'm one of those people who is always trying to improve, always trying to get better. I'm trying to deepen my personal development, my connection to God, to all things. I'm trying to get better at speaking. I'm trying to get better at coaching. I get new certifications. I learn new techniques. So I'm always trying to improve. So of course I'm part of a mastermind, and I was in a mastermind with James Whitaker. You may know James from being on this podcast. He's also the host of the Win the Day podcast. Great guy, one of my favorite humans I've ever met. But this is the fourth time I've been in his talk about improving your podcast, how to get better at podcasts, how to get more views, how to get more listens, how to make the guest experience better, how to make the audience experience better. And again, this is the fourth time I've heard him, so I've heard almost everything he has to say on the topic. But I learn something new each time, and he always brings something new he's learned each time because he's always trying to get better. So this last time, every time I listen to James talk about the podcast, I get a little overwhelmed and I have a little meltdown, and it's mostly because what he does with his podcast and what I do with my podcast is a little bit different. My motto is anything worth doing is worth doing half-assed, otherwise it doesn't get done. Writing a book. Uh, I have 500 episodes of a podcast. If I was a perfectionist, I would never get a podcast out. But James is one of those people who's really committed to excellence. So if you watch his podcast, he only does in-person podcasts in a studio. He lives in Los Angeles, so he books guests when they're coming into Los Angeles and gets them to come into the studio to have the conversation. And it looks beautiful. His video content is so much better than mine when I do mine on Zoom. But he has systems for everything. He has systems for booking the guest, creating assets for the guests, everything that he does, how he does his research. He has his assistant, he has Asana, he has all these workflows and everything. And I always feel a little inadequate, and I have a little bit of a meltdown of that's just too much for me to do my coaching business, to write my books, to spend time with my family, to take care of myself, to like it's just too much. I can't do it. And then I have to remind myself I may be constantly improving and always trying to be better, but I'm really clear on the adage that it's 1% better every day. It's incrementally better. It's do what you can today. One of my first coaches, Neil Fiore, uh, he um, he wrote a book called The Now Habit about procrastination, and he had a wonderful meditation that he gave people with like me with ADD about how to get grounded into the present. And the meditation started with letting go of the past. The past has already happened. There's nothing you can do about the past. We don't even remember it correctly. So the past is done. And let go of the future, because the truth is, we don't know. Everything we know about the future is made up. But he also said something really cool that I held on to, which was we can't do anything in the future. Hold on, we're going to bookmark that. You can't do anything in the future. So the third part of the meditation is now that we've let go of the past, we've let go of the future. Now we can be grounded in this beautiful present moment. And I love that. That was really helpful for me with the ADD. And the Now Habit is a really great book. And Neil was the first coach I ever had. Really, really kind of cool guy. Um, but now let's talk about this thing in the future. Like when I wrote the Rising Leader Handbook, when I read it back, there's so much in there for you to do to improve your leadership skills. We're doing a boss empathy map. We're getting to know our bosses. Then we're doing an empathy map on all the people who work with us. Then we're doing one for the people who work for us. And then we're taking personality tests, and we're trying to get better at so many things. And like with my clients, I tell them you cannot get better at everything all at once. In fact, you can't actually get better at anything in the future. The only thing you can do is here and now. So when I apply that to myself for the podcast, I actually was sitting thinking, I was overwhelmed with all the stuff I'm doing with the book launch and with my clients and other things. And I'm like, the podcast is good enough, right? It does what I needed to do. Everybody tells me it's a good experience. But then I realized that I'm selling myself short here. So what can I pick from what James had to say. What one thing can I pick that will make the biggest bang for the buck, that will make the biggest difference in the podcast? And can I implement that one thing? And one of the things that I want to implement is, even though I'm not going to do in-person podcasts, I'm going to continue to do it on Zoom, which doesn't give you as good video um, content to use on social media as James does in person. I can improve my Zoom. I can upgrade my Zoom, and I can get HD Zoom quality pictures and that kind of thing. So I'm going to do that, but I'm also hiring a video editor to take more excerpts, because I do one per episode for the guest, and to put on social media. James does probably 5 or 6 or 7 and puts it in a folder for his guests. So I'm like, I can do that. I can hire an editor to take excerpts from the podcast, put it in a folder, and each guest get just so much better and so much more content for themselves to share. And that benefits me, because more people, their audience gets to know me a little bit better. So I can implement one thing. How does this relate to you? So you read the Rising Leader Handbook, or you read any leadership book, or you read any skills book, or you're trying to improve any place. You can't improve everything all at once. What's the one thing you can do that's going to make the biggest bang for your buck? And then you can't, again, remember, you can't do that in the future. You can only do that in the conversation you're having now. If you're sitting at your desk in the next task that you decide you're going to do, does that make sense? You can only improve in the moment. In this moment, I'm going to do something differently. Does that make sense? Great. So if we're going to improve incrementally, if we're going to add one thing, the other flip side is, what's one thing we can stop doing that will improve like, what's one thing that you're doing? What's one habit? What's one distraction? What's one thing that's making your wheels spin? That if you got support, again, never have to do anything alone. If you got support to be more focused, to let go of that thing, can you do that? And for me, I was thinking about what's the one thing I can let go. And one thing I do is I send an email to each guest, letting them know that the podcast is live. Here's some social assets for you. I thank them personally, because I do it myself instead of having my assistant do it, because it's a personal email that needs to go to them, because I want to thank them for being on the podcast. So I realized, oh, I can actually have my assistant go and get the links to the podcast, because I give them a link to the Apple podcast, and I give them a link to the website. I can actually have my assistant put all of that together for me, put together the social media folder on Google Drive or on Dropbox or something like that. And then I can just write the personal note at the top, and they can take care of everything else. It's like, okay, so there's one thing I can stop doing, and there's one thing I can start doing. And now it's manageable. Once I get that under my belt and I get that going, then I can add another thing. So what's one thing you can add? What's one skill you can add? If you have the Rising Leader Handbook, great. What's one thing that's going to make most bang for the buck? When I'm coaching my clients, I do a 360, which is an interview with everybody who works with them and for them, and who they work for. And I find that one thing that everybody's going to notice, that there's going to be a change. Because when people notice that there's a change, now they're conditioned to look for that, right? So what's the one thing that you can make and improve? And remember, don't overwhelm yourself. This is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. We're trying to get 1% incrementally better every day, and that's manageable. Hope this was helpful. Love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.